The Democratic Alliance says it will fight President Cyril Ramaphosa's reported plan to not publicise the terms of reference of the investigation into whether arms were in fact loaded onto the Russian ship the Lady R in Simonstown in December. Athi Mtongana joins us now from Parliament. She's speaking to the DA leader, John Steenhuisen. Athi, good afternoon to you. What's Steenhuisen saying?
Well, I am joined by the DA's leader, John Steenhuisen. Thank you so much for your time and making time out of your busy schedule. But, of course, this issue of the allegations by the U.S. ambassador, very, very damning if they were true. Now, the President, of course, instituting and establishing this inquiry. But now, of course, the news and the reports that the terms of reference will not be made public. You're challenging this. Why?
Yes, because I think it's a very, very important case where the public interest outweighs any right to secrecy that the presidency is trying to put around this issue. These allegations were made in the public forum. It has been well ventilated for 6 months. It makes no sense whatsoever to keep the findings of this report secret, nor the terms of reference. Bear in mind, this is also being paid for by public money. I think the public, the media, and the opposition and Parliament need to be able to understand exactly what's going on here, because how do we hold the President and the ministers and the officials accountable if we are in the dark around what is contained in the report?
How far are you willing to go? Because we have seen a brief response from the presidency, and they point out to secrecy laws and security and, high classified information not being made public. How far are you going to go in your challenge?
Well, we'll go all the way to the Constitutional Court if necessary. And this is a nonsense that's being spread now by the presidency. You cannot tell me that something that happened 6 months ago can now have an impact on our national security. We should have been worried about that 6 months ago. Now is the time for accountability and answers. Now, I think what we're seeing here very, very clearly is an attempt by the presidency to cover up what's gone on here. And that can only be because they are not sure about what was on the ship, what was off the ship, and they know that releasing the report publicly is going to undermine the statements made by the Minister of Defence that there was nothing on the ship. She used a lot more colourful language. But I think it's a cover-up. And I think that as South Africans, we should demand more from our government, particularly in the fact that we're a democracy. This isn't North Korea, where the President decides what we know and when we know it. And they mustn't hide behind this subterfuge of national security. It's a nonsense argument.
What do you know then, Mr. Steenhuisen, about what had actually transpired? I know you are a leader of the official opposition party and certainly have influence where necessary. What do you know about what might have happened there? And also this links back to what your views are insofar as the relationship between Russia and South Africa. You recently went on to an international media channel where you were speaking about your concerns, particularly with regards to South Africa's stance in the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Well, I think the government's stance, they've tried to portray themselves as non-aligned. But the war games, the numbers of high-level delegations, military delegations going to Moscow, and now this Lady R saga, have ripped the veil off that non-alignment quite clearly. They have aligned position, and in doing so, are putting very, very beneficial trade and jobs opportunities for South Africa at great risk. AGOA is responsible for thousands of jobs in South Africa, particularly in the agriculture and manufacturing sector. We have bilateral agreements with the United Kingdom and the European Union. 77% of our foreign direct investment comes from those three entities. Why would we put that all at risk for essentially 6% of foreign direct investment, which is China and Russia combined? It's because the ANC are receiving money through Russian oligarchs and it's funding the ANC. That's the only reason that they would put an entire economy and the well-being of thousands of people through their jobs at risk, is if there was some financial benefit. And I think that's why we have to join the dots. But we're not going to be able to join the dots if this terrible reliance on the secrecy rules, just like the previous government used to rely on state security to cover up what they were doing. I think that we demand answers, and we will go all the way to the Concourt if necessary to get those answers.
Before I let you go, quickly, two matters. The President is sending certain ministers out to go and explain South Africa's stance with regards to the conflict. And secondly, there are talks about whether or not the BRICS summit should be held in South Africa. We know South Africa's non-aligned stance, and we know the DA is also challenging the South African government to get a declaratory order for Russia's President Vladimir Putin to be detained if he attends the BRICS summit in August here in South Africa.
Well, I'll say there's an old saying in politics: if you're explaining, you're losing. And if you have to send people overseas to explain a non-aligned position, it's clearly not seen as a non-aligned position. And I think that this is obviously desperation now kicking in, and hopefully the realization by the government that they've put the jobs and lives and livelihoods of thousands of South Africans on the line through the relationship here. Secondly, there's no problem with the BRICS summit taking place here, but we have an international law obligation and a local law obligation. And the al-Bashir matter was very, very clear that South Africa, as long as we're a member of the ICC, as long as we've are signatories to the Statute of Rome, and as long as that is domesticated in our law, we have an obligation to effect that warrant should Mr. Putin arrive here. And we're going to court to get the declarator because we don't want to see the same ball tossing as we saw when al-Bashir was here between various departments. The court must set out very clearly whose obligations have to be met and how those should be affected so that we can have clarity. I think the government should be putting pressure on Mr. Putin not to come, to attend virtually or potentially move the summit, but to not damage South Africa's international standing any more than it's currently been damaged by our position on the wrong side of history in the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
All right, thank you so much for your time. We really do appreciate it. John Steenhuisen, the leader of the official opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, saying they will go as far as the Constitutional Court to challenge the secrecy around the non-publicizing of the terms of reference of the investigation that is looking into the issue related to those allegations that were made by U.S. Ambassador with regards to South Africa allegedly supplying arms to Russia from Simonstown, of course, here in Cape Town in the Western Cape. Back to you in studio.
Athi Mtongana, thank you very much indeed.